Well, again, it's Karim on Doesn't Matter. How are you all? I hope you're faring well. Reading a lot at the moment because there's not much else to do. Train by yourself, play with the kids, read a lot. And there's a lot of obvious preoccupation with the present. What's happening now, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen this year. And that's important because that sets the scene for the future. That determines to some degree where we'll be in 3 years' time, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, 20 years' time. And certainly the times that we're living through right now in this moment are crucial in creating the next decade or two. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, that was in process already with the growth of globalization, the spread of various disruptive technologies. That was already happening. We were headed towards another recession, which is usually an indication of not simply an economic cycle, but consolidation. Generally, a lot more investment happens in recessionary dips than in boom peaks. When you're booming and you're pulling in the cash, you're paying out dividends to your shareholders. You're keeping your share price high and more than you are investing. When, however, and you're minimising your debt obviously too, when times get tough and growth slows, and then large corporations in particular use debt as a weapon. It's an investment weapon to create more opportunities down the track by leveraging technology. It's nearly always technology. Leveraging technology and systems that aren't in play yet or that are inefficient to become efficient so that they might reinstigate another growth period. And that's precisely what happens. New technologies come into play, new methodologies come into play, just-in-time method in retail and marketing and warehousing and so on. And we start another growth cycle. So, it's a natural part of the schema. We've been taught to fear and hate recessions and fear and hate debt because for many of us, recessions are very painful and debt is a very difficult thing to manage when you're just a normal worker, okay? But on the grander scale of things, it's part of life. It's necessary if we want things to keep getting better. So all the stuff that's happening lately, as I've already said in previous videos, has just given a shot of steroids into that whole process. There's a whole range of biotech, medical technologies, health technologies, but also materials technologies that are getting a massive shot in the bum because there are needs for certain things. Manufacturing itself in many countries is about to get a new lease on life, at least in terms of certain types of industry, certain types of sectors within manufacturing. There's going to be a change to globalization. Are we still going to buy stuff from China? Hell yeah. Are we still going to buy stuff from Pakistan and India and other places once they recover from the shitstorm that's just about to hit them now with COVID? Yeah, of course we will. Absolutely, 100%, because they will still be able to outproduce us efficiency-wise for a while yet. Not for too long, but for a while, for the better part of the next decade. For certain items, especially low-cost items, high-volume items, they're going to be able to outproduce us. Your 3D printer isn't efficient enough yet. Even the high industrial MakerBots and super-duper ones that are coming out of multiple countries now, they're still not quite efficient enough to compete with a guy who's being paid, $5 a day. You're going to struggle to compete with that. Give it time, another 10 years, they will easily outcompete the cheapest labour. And that's now going to come a lot faster because more and more people are going to try to fit those technologies into markets where there's more of a margin to play with. And that will result in sort of more of an even spread of manufacturing around the planet. That's going to change a lot of things. It's also going to break China's, in particular China's, stranglehold on production. You know, they own most of the factories in the world. They really do. And then there's lots of other countries that own a big chunk of it as well. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh has a huge hold on textiles. A lot of these companies are going to, over time, transfer, because they're often run by private companies, even though they're based in those countries, are going to transfer to automated systems. And then they're going to move those automated systems to wherever there's the best support. So the countries that are forward thinking are going to shift their focus to technical support, to industries that can supply parts and staff, highly trained staff, to support those factories. If you do that, the factories will stay in your country. If you don't do that, the factories will move to somewhere where they can have the support. Now, it's always been that way with any kind of factory, all the human-run factories, but automated factories, which will be largely robotic, they'll be the same. They still require people to manage them, look after them, clean them, highly specialised people. I mean, cleaning a factory full of automated systems is not the same as cleaning a factory with machines operated by humans. And I was an industrial cleaner once, so I understand the difference between the two. There's more specialised operations that have to be taken into account when you're working with robots. It's also extremely dangerous, okay? You're obviously not going to work when they're on, but still nonetheless, you're dealing with quite an alien environment. You're dealing with machines that are exceedingly expensive, and it will be the end of your cleaning career should you damage one. So they're going to need specialised and trained staff, even for just cleaning, just that menial job of cleaning those factories, let alone maintaining and looking after them. The countries that really focus on that, and hopefully cross fingers Australia does that, will not only retain factories, they'll probably accrete more if they can be competitive with the home countries of various companies that are starting these automated systems up. So I see the future is a massive leap towards automation on a scale that we've never seen before, simply because we just had a massive wake-up call. Now, we had a wake-up call at the ground level about being prepared, about cooperating, about paranoia and conspiracy heads everywhere, and fringe ideas gaining traction and damaging public efforts to control this pandemic. We've had a wake-up call about how easily our freedoms can be lost to authorities, and the dangers of authoritarianism, which the fringe arguably have raised to some point validly, though the degree to which they take it is insane. But we've had to wake up to a whole bunch, as a person, just a working person, middle-class person, we've had to wake up to a whole bunch of new things. But the people above us, governments and corporations, you can't take your eyes off them, okay? And at risk of sounding like one of those crazy conspiratorial fringe dwellers, they're not to be trusted, and they don't have our best interests at heart all the time. Sometimes they do because it coincides with theirs, but where it doesn't coincide with theirs, they will very quickly find methods, means, and rationalisations to step away from us and leave us in the lurch. Even governments. Corporations, 100%. They're there, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. They don't owe you or me shit. They don't. Not legally, maybe ethically, maybe in some sustainability sense of, safeguarding and shepherding the resources of the planet and not completely fucking up the ecologies that all our industries depend upon. Yeah, absolutely. They owe us more than what they legally do on an ethical basis. But the reality is that ethical bases can't usually be enforced unless they have legal grounding. And right now there's limited frangibility for efforts to hold corporations responsible for the social impacts of their actions. If they absolutely overtly pollute the earth or damage the air, or in some way directly violate people's health, yes, they can be held accountable. But outside of that, they're free agents to a large degree. They're sovereign entities. And there's a certain necessity for that too, as much as I hate to admit it. But there is, if you want corporations that are going to be truly effective in doing what they do, which is create wealth, create ideas, promulgate and spread systems that are further going to improve human quality of life. Sometimes, not always. They're deciding what to do now. They lost trillions. We've all lost a lot of money, but they've lost trillions and trillions of dollars. They've watched projections for the next, 2, 3, 4 years down the tubes. They're facing massive investment. They're lining up in front of governments going, we need money to safeguard our existence and you need us to continue to exist. Governments are going, oh my God, we're going to have the deficit to end all deficits, every government in the world. But they're also beginning to look at MMT, modern monetary theory, which I've discussed earlier, with new and fresh eyes. And there's quite a few less magic money, stupid claims like that for people who really don't understand the economics of it, or have an ideological bias against it, which can be worse. You can address ignorance, you can't address zealotry or fanaticism. It's very difficult anyway. But yeah, they're looking at options and ways of looking at the economy that could bring us out of this, actually sail us out of this with a relative degree, relatively unscathed by comparison to the other option of following the sort of Keynesian neoliberal path and falling in a heap. I don't think that'll work at all. So there are people above us making these decisions, and they're making decisions while we're arguing about jobs and should we come out of lockdown in a couple of months or 3 months or 4 months, and how we're going to find work, and what industries are, the furthest most people are thinking is what industries are going to be alive still and what industries are going to go down. That's starting to move more in the right direction. But governments and businesses are thinking, many of them have been running a scam on how high unemployment or how low unemployment is for a long time. I mean, most governments are factoring in people who work a few hours as employed. We all know that's bullshit. We all know that the unemployment figures globally are substantially higher than what governments will admit to, both state and federal governments. And a lot of that's being revealed now. A lot of that's coming out. A lot of the way they calculate employment, underemployment, and what they exactly are being revealed for the debacles, the farces that they are. They're facades to hide the fact that we've had trouble employing the kind of population that we've got, with population growth that we've got. We've had trouble employing people for the better part of 30 years. It's been difficult for 30 years. And as more and more low-skilled to mid-skilled jobs disappear into the more of automation and artificial intelligence and software, there's only going to be a requirement for highly skilled jobs, highly skilled people in specific areas. And that's going to keep growing over the next 10, 20 years. And it's going to be much faster than it would have previously been, because events like this are catalysts for massive reform and change. And as much as it's a catalyst for us at the ground level, it's an even bigger catalyst for governments and corporations. It's a bigger catalyst for social and economic elites and political elites. They've been horrified by what this can potentially do. And I know there's a lot of conspiracy heads running around going, oh, they're taking advantage of it. Of course they are. They're scheming opportunists. But, you can take advantage of a situation while being shit scared about the long-term outcomes of it. Okay? They're not going to knock a dollar back now. They're not going to knock the opportunity to slide in some dirty legislation here and there now, while still being completely terrified about all the inadvertent and unknown variables that they can't control. Even if they knew them, they couldn't control them, not effectively anyway. Most countries aren't China. And even China can't control all those variables. They're going to find increasingly that even their authoritarian state has limitations as to what it can and can't do. So there's this scale where we're at, there's a whole nother level to this game. And I want people to become more aware of that game, that geopolitical, futurist, long-term planning game that's about the structures, the way we work, who works, how we work, all those things. A lot of changes are coming down the track, big ones, and we need to be ready for them. We need to be having debates and arguments and discussions about them. We need to be thinking about how we're going to navigate the swamp of confusion and the toxic shit that's going to emerge from these conversations, and then the inevitable negative side of these changes as well as the positive sides. Governments are going to need to play a bigger role in the future, which I don't like. I'm scared of governments, and for good reason. I'm frightened of what people do when they get too much power over other people. But I also know that we have excellent capacity to limit those powers, to limit what they can and can't do. We do. And we just have to make sure that there's enough popular support behind creating adequate limitations on what authority can do in the future, while at the same time safeguarding the fact that in the future, earning money is going to be more and more difficult, particularly for those who can't fit into STEM, those who are a surplus, even if they are STEM people, a surplus, it's too many, we're already getting that now. Those who can't fit into a high desire, high demand sector, what do? I mean, you can say learn to code, and it's become a bit of a meme lately, you know, learn to code, dude. Not everyone can learn to code. You can stick some people behind, you can teach anyone to code. Can they code well enough to work? No, they can't. They can't. I can teach anyone a box. I can teach anyone of you how to box. 3 months, you'll know how to throw some basic punches, move your head, do a few things. Can I teach you to be a fighter? No, less than 1% of people ever get good enough to fight. Far less than 1%. Doesn't matter how hard I train people. Most people are going to do okay if they have to defend themselves, but they're not going to be fighting. They're just not. It's a completely different level, and that's what the industry demands in these sectors. It demands a level of excellence that most people are incapable of, and this is what most people don't want to hear. Most people never want to hear this. We're not equal. We're not. I see that in the gym all the time. I get people coming through, they're not equal. Some people can deadlift more than others no matter how hard they train. Some people are faster, some people are stronger, some people are smarter, quicker, have better reflexes. And you can improve on those things to some degree, but there are genetic, biological limitations. And it's not a popular concept, but it's a fact. And I defy anyone, I will debate anyone, anytime, anywhere, who wants to say differently. Have absolutely 100%. It's a scientific fact. We are not the same. Men and women are very different in some respects, and individuals are even more different. There's even more broad differences between individuals. It's astonishing, as well as between genders, okay? So those differences force some people out of some areas and allow other people to walk straight in. We have to acknowledge that. That's the reality that's coming. That's the reality that's coming. And if we accept that, embrace it, bring it in, we can do something about it. We can make it good. We can make it better than it is now. But if we fight it, we resist it, it's not going to work well for us at all. The reality is that by 2030, we're going to have a massive problem with employment. It's not going away. It's never going to go away. They'll try to hide the figures. They'll try to Dutch things up as much as they can. But at the end of the day, it's too hard nowadays to lie. You know, you get caught lying. There are too many people watching you, too much scrutiny. In the end of the day, ideas make their way out. Lies are revealed. Inadequacies in arguments are revealed. Omissions are revealed. Cherry picking is revealed. And at some point, people get at least a rough idea about what's actually happening. And they're already getting the idea that unemployment has probably always been a fair bit high, a few percentage points higher than we admit. And more that's going to be reeled over time because it's going to be harder and harder to control the nature of the problem. We're going to need a UBI and soon. And the coronavirus supplement that we're receiving here and that they're being used overseas in many countries is probably going to be a good test bed for how that works. UBI experiments have been going on for years in multiple countries, most of them pretty good, some of them ongoing. I think we're going to see more of that. We're going to need job guarantees. We're going to need some way of giving people enough hours so that people can not only have a UBI but work at least some hours, and we can spread those hours out amongst enough people. We're going to need to look at paying people for different jobs. Now, a lot of those jobs are going to have to be government paid. The private sector can't carry that many of those kinds of jobs. I don't see a company making profit from someone reading children's stories online or in libraries. But government could pay that. Local governments, councils could pay that. And that could be a legitimate and enjoyable, meaningful job for someone that could give them 10, 15, 20 hours a week and boost their income up on top of a UBI to something quite reasonable even by today's standards. We have to start looking at how we contribute to the economy, because the reality is that more tax is taken from companies, businesses, royalties than is taken from income tax. Income tax makes up barely a third of actual taxation. So they need us far more for our spending, our ability to stimulate particular sectors of the economy and spend, than they need for us to earn. Okay, that's a firm reality. They need us for our expertise, for the intangibles that we contribute towards economies. They need us to maintain healthy families that don't break down and don't divorce at record levels. The families that don't harm each other with DV and all other things like that. They need healthy society, because a healthy society is cheap society. It doesn't generate all these extra costs. You haven't got broken homes everywhere. You haven't got delinquency left, right, and centre. You don't have an excess of suffering and a large sum of unnecessary suffering that just leads to expenditure that's often ineffective anyway. So I think getting it right at the ground level, how we earn, and then making sure there are caveats in place like free education. Education should not cost us. We should pay through taxation only. There should be no additional costs other than tax costs. An education levy would be a fantastic idea, okay? But we fundamentally need to take the massive costs that have accrued in education. They need to go. They need to go. They're a choke on innovation. They're a choke on our capacity to improve people. Not just improve their capacity to earn or be wage earners, but their capacity to be decent people, to be aware. Yes, I know people will quote, niche market, niche studies, gender studies and faculties like that have, in my opinion, have questionable value, particularly nowadays. But they have some value. All of them have some value to some degree, if for no more than being a good example of how not to manage an intellectual faculty. But nonetheless, that's another video. Everything has value to some degree, and if we accord that, we accept that, we can all contribute in various ways. We can find more types of jobs, more types of ways in which people can earn some extra cash. And if there's a ground floor to it with the UBI, and there's a further reinforcement of that with a guaranteed number of hours that you can do something that you're qualified in. Like I said, I teach martial arts. If the government wanted to give me some money to run some extra free classes for kids, okay, or for people, or for old people, or whatever, go for it. I'd be happy, okay? And that would help keep my business alive and keep everything going. It would. It'd be wonderful. But they don't, not yet. And that's the thing. There's a variety of imaginative, innovative ways in which we could supercharge the economy and redirect and create new jobs. And the return, will you be paying tax on that? So some of it would come back in form of taxation, the rest would come back in form of some would come back in form of GST, goods and services taxes, The expenditure would raise GDP. You're driving particular areas that need to be driven for growth. They're returning more shares to their shareholders. The shareholders are happy to continue investing. Boom, boom, boom. We keep growing for a while. Remember, there's always a bit of a downturn. There's always investment periods and low growth periods. But essentially, it's still more or less an upward track with dips moving up. So I have been waffling for a while, sorry guys. But so I'm just saying, try to think a little more about where we're going in the long run, and how the shape of those things are going to be. There's obviously more. I think family and community is going to be a big source of reflection right now. How we treat each other, how we regard our neighbours, how we social distancing and the nature of COVID itself have certainly changed that to a degree, but also, how we police each other. And we do. Do we do it kindly, with respect, with understanding? Or are we going to be pedantic twats, running to authority instead of trying to police ourselves? This is an opportunity for us as communities and as individuals to talk to each other, to be libertarian with one another, to be respectful of each other, respect each other's boundaries, but engage with each other and voluntarily behave decently. See, not everything can be mandated by the government. I think governments can create jobs, they can help stimulate more jobs, they can create fair and just taxation systems and legal systems, and they can assist us in a whole variety of ways, create education systems and health systems. They can't make us decent people to each other, okay? And they shouldn't try. China's doing that increasingly. We've seen anti-state policies in multiple countries, EU here. I would like to avoid that. I would like us to take charge of our lives, take charge of the way that we relate to one another, treat each other with decency, treat each other with respect, but also cut each other some slack. You're allowed to be a misanthrope sometimes. You're allowed to be an asshole on occasion, as long as you recognise it and you rein it in, all right? Everyone gets a chance to be a twat. Everyone gets a chance to be a little grumpy or a little upset, and you have to give them that. You don't have to put up with it, you don't have to stick around for it, but you have to acknowledge the fact that you'll be there too. You're going to take your place with the dunce's cap on at some point. If we all remember that, it's going to make getting through all of life's difficulties a lot easier. All right, so I think this is going to make some big changes in our community, in our relationships, hopefully more for the better than the worse. I think our reliance on each other has been drawn into, both at a global level and certainly now on an interpersonal level, our reliance on each other has been heavily exposed. How much we need each other, how difficult it is to function, for most people at least, except the deeply introverted onliners. Most people are struggling to some degree with the isolation and with the fact that they probably also needed those people in their lives a lot more than they thought they did. They were less independent than they thought they were. And there's a few people out there that are going, woohoo, this is awesome. And God bless them too, we need them as well, okay? They're the guys that sit in their basement and come up with new ideas to change the world. They're the ones that grind away at vaccines for 21 hours a day, and they're the ones that suffer often, not always, but often suffer less because they're deep introverts who are really driven to their work. We need those people too. We need all kinds of people. That's the whole point. That I think this is driving that recognition that, it takes a lot of people to run society. It takes a lot of views, a lot of attitudes, and they're not always going to be complementary. They're not always going to be in agreement. Often when we start conflict with each other, the irony being that we still need them. What does that say about society? Does it say that conflict is inevitable? Does it say that disagreement is actually healthy and a fundamental feature, to some degree at least, of a society, of a robust democratic society, a free society? Does it say that this is the symmetry of being human, and that systems that try to take that away, whether they be far left, sort of right over to China systems, or the far left PC twats, or whether it's alt-right religious evangelicals and neolibs and crony capitalists and so on and so on the right end of the scale, who just are so quick to grab the reins of power and start legislating. That power is incredibly dangerous. And we need to take advantage of that as much as possible and seize the day ourselves as individuals. If we do it as individuals, we do it as families, we do it as communities, we can change the world just by just doing what we do, but also accepting the fact that there are people in the world that we're going to disagree with quite badly. We're going to have horrible arguments with and not like at all. But those people are vital. They're vital to everything that exists out there that we love. Okay? If you think that making the world a better place is to remove everyone that you disagree with, I wouldn't remove Nazis. Now, I'm a person of colour and I've been subject to racism quite severely throughout my life. It will touch me to the end of my life. There will be more events, though less and less nowadays, thank goodness. I would not remove a single Nazi from the planet if I had the power. Not one Ku Klux Klaner, not one. Why? Who am I to decide whether they should be removed or not, whether they should be gone or not, or their ideology should be gone or not? Who am I to decide that? The war of ideas is beyond us. It's bigger than us. Okay? I don't know when the way that person might act or behave or might actually one day change their mind will be key in a domino effect on a whole range of people around them. You start waving your magic wand, you'll fuck that whole process up. We're not gods, we're just people. We're people who fall in love with our opinions about these really complex matters. We don't know who's going to be eventful, useful, crucial at some point, and it might not be someone we agree with or someone we like. And we have to hold that in our minds. This shit is way too complex for any one of us or any group of us to truly understand or manage. It's going to take all of us together doing that. And I don't think we can do it in a world that isn't truly inclusive, okay? But an inclusive world allows for argument and debate and disagreements, even vitriolic disagreements, okay? The left has gone really wrong in that respect. They want an inclusive world, but an inclusive world that doesn't allow for anyone who disagrees with their particular brand of inclusivism. You can't have that. And then you have people on the right, many of whom who are not inclusive, who want to exclude particular kinds of people they don't like. And I'm saying it's okay not to like someone. It's not okay. There are cultures on the planet. I know it's not popular to say I don't like certain cultures as much as I like others. Okay? There's no such thing as a bad culture. They all have value. They all have redemptive qualities. But there are cultures I don't like. I'm not going to go into that today.